Hi, Stefan the BMW DIY guy here. Our project today is the AvinUSA Avant 3 for the E53 X5. This is a really cool upgrade, and in this case, this is going to be replacing the Avant 2 that came out several years ago and is a wonderful progression of projects and products, and it's really cool to get this in. I'm absolutely excited to have this new features in the car. Now, as we go through this, you're going to see me install this. Even if you have the OEM or factory stereo still installed, which most people are going to, it's not a big deal, and I'll walk through some of the differences in the installation, but the details themselves really aren't that hard. There also are two different kinds of framing on the inside of the dash of the E53, either the older style or the newer style. The older style has a fixed frame, which mine has, or the newer actually has a frame that can come out with 4 screws. Now, if you have the newer style that has those 4 screws, you can sidestep some of the extra work that I have to do this installation, but it's really not that hard. If you have the older style, don't worry about it, it's not that hard. You just have to add a few extra steps. You're gonna have to cut the frame to get it installed, but it's absolutely worth it, especially if you're coming out of the factory stereo system. Now, if you have the OEM double DIN navigation system, the original installed, you're going to have it even easier because the brackets that you have in place are already the brackets you're going to use for this system. So depending on what you have, an older style, newer style, you know, the single DIN setup, the divided factory stereo, we're going to walk through it. It's all going to be good. This really is an easy install and absolutely worth it for the technology. And what a cool step forward to put into your car. All right, let's go out to the garage. So I'm out in the car. So let's talk through really briefly, depending on what you have in your car. So what we're looking at is not the factory setup. This is actually the previous model from Avin. This is the Avant 2. So I'm going to be replacing the Avant 2 with the new Avant 3. And so I've made some changes already to my car that you probably haven't. If you've got the factory set up, it's a little bit different, but it's really easy to get to the stage where this is out, and I'm going to take this out, but I wanted to talk through this first. So if you've got the factory set up, you'll have that little flip door, and your stereo, your head unit, and it will be in 2 different pieces. You'll have the top piece with all of your controls, and the bottom plate, and the CD player as well. To take that out, it's really easy. So obviously flip the door up. You'll pull the button off the control section, and underneath that, you'll see the screw that you need to get to be able to tip that piece out. This side will come out. When you pull that screw out, it'll tip out, and then you can pull it out and you'll pull the plug off because you'll have the wiring harness plug on one side. Pull it off and set it aside. This is also, my X5 also has the DSP system in it as well, which was really a challenge when working with the Avant 2 because originally it was not DSP compatible where the Avant 3 is. So I had to come up with some alternative ways to make this work. And it did work and worked really successfully. It just took some unusual effort to get it done. But so you're going to see a little bit of changes to some of my wiring when I get into it, but I'll point it out as I go. Don't be thrown off by that. I've changed things a little bit back behind all this. But so you pull out the CD, that control section will come out, and then you'll see 2 screws on either side. You can undo those screws, and then you can pull the CD player out. Now, what you want to do before that is this door section. You'll notice on either side in the doors, there'll be a couple of clips. You depress those clips, and the whole door assembly will come out, and then you can get to the 2 screws and pull the CD player out, and then you'll be open in this void space behind all your stereo, and all of that will be out. When you pull the CD player out, you'll have a big plug on the back with a horse collar on it. You open that horse collar, pull it off, you'll have your original wiring harness, and you can pull those 2 pieces out and set them aside. So I know that I can't demonstrate that right now, but it really is that simple. Pull the button off, loosen it, pull the top section, unplug, pull the door off, pull the CD player out, and you're good to go. So I'm going to take the Avant 2 out now, which is a matter of just getting underneath it and pulling it out, and then move forward with how we work with the cabling to get the new one installed. But I wanted to point that out first. Don't be thrown by the fact that it looks a little bit different. It really is that easy to get into. In this case, you don't even have to pull your vents, which you have to do in a number of models of BMW, you have to pull the vents first. You don't even have to do that in this case. Your little door assembly also, you're going to take and set aside because you're not going to use it again once you have the new unit in. All right, so I'm going to pull the Avant 2 out, and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so the Avin 2 is out, and you're going to see a little bit of extra cabling here, which is unusual because of the extension I had to run for the Avin 2 to get around the DSP workaround that I had to do. So first of all, I've reached back behind. I've just gently pushed out the AC controls and all the like, just so I've got a little extra space to work with here down below. A little bit hard to see with my camera angle, but all I did was just push those controls out. I also took my plastic trim tool and stuck it in between this upper part of the frame and the vents, just to get a little bit of space out of the vents, and put my hand back behind, and now the vents are out as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhook the vents to make sure that I've got all the space that I have to work with, because what I want to be able to do is work in this space really effectively and be able to take the frame out, the existing OEM frame. Now again, my frame is going to look a little bit different than yours as well. You should have a crossbar that goes across a few other pieces. Again, I had to modify this for the Avin 2, and it doesn't really affect it all that much as far as what we're talking about. We just need to take this frame out. So that's going to come out next. And I'll show you how to do that once I get the vents out. So the lower controls are out, just like I mentioned, by pushing them out. And forgive a little, filming this by hand for a moment, but I really want to zoom in and show you what I'm going to do. So there are two different styles of interior framing here for the X5. There's what I believe is the newer style, and this is a 2001 E53. But I believe in the newer styles, this crossbar across the top where your vents secure is flat, and there'll be a screw here and a screw here that holds all of this framing in place. That's not the case in a 2001. So I've already done some modification to this interior framing to fit the Avant 2 in quite some time ago. This box assembly that sat right here on both sides, and there's a crossbar here that I removed, and this crossbar, or the box assembly, I cut back. So I cut off about an inch of all of this to set it further back to have a deeper recess, so the Avant 2 could fit, because it wouldn't have fit otherwise. And so I had to do this modification. Like I said, in the newer E53s, you can pull a screw here and a lower screw here, and upper screw here, and all of this framing comes out, and the brackets provided by Avin will fit perfectly at that point. So as I try to do all this one-handed, so forgive me if I fumble around a little bit. The bracket will sit in here, will sit in like this. It'll go in this upper screw here, lower screw here, and you're going to be fine. I'm actually getting a little bit of sun here on a Pacific Northwest day. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to be able to make this still work in an older frame, just like I think you're going to be able to make this work as well, but you're going to have to make some modifications. So first of all, when I look at the bracket on the left side specifically, and as I look at this, you can see how this lower part fits into the screw down below and needs to fit flush. And the upper section would fit in as I have these reversed. My apologies. Let me grab the other one. So as you set all this in, you can see how this fits into place. The lower bracket will fit into a screw down here down low that's an existing screw that you can see, and this upper one would go into the screw if you have the newer frame type. So there's a couple of things that need to happen first. Now, if you look really closely, you can see that there's a small little cutout in this frame piece as is. I'm going to widen this cutout very slightly to fit the top part of this bracket to fit into place. As is right now, I mean, I probably need to take off about 1/4 of an inch on each side, probably just a little bit. So I'm going to get the frame the new frame exactly in the right position, and then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark on either side. Now this gap, the irony about this gap being right here is this gap is about perfect, and the depth on it is about perfect. So all I'm going to do is widen the gap ever so slightly so this frame will sit back just slightly further. Now, the other thing that needs to happen is to get this to fit into the right position, it needs to sit over a little bit further. So to sit over a little bit further, this piece of the frame, as you can see, this ridge right here needs to go. Now, I've already cut this box back, so I'm not gonna have to cut this box back any further because I've cut it back a good inch or so as is. Now, what you could do in your case, so if you haven't made any of the changes that I've made, it would be very simple. Just simply cut this box off entirely. Cut it right here, cut it right here along this line here, and then also there's a post down here at the bottom. Cut that and cut that off, and that entire box will just come clean off. And then it'll be out of the way, because yours is gonna stick up higher. It's gonna sit in the way and be a problem. It's not going to be in my case because I've cut this back already. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave this in. I just need to trim this piece back to about the same depth. Now, when I look at the other side as well, I've got the same situation here. I've got this little ridge right here that I've already cut this box back. So I'm gonna cut this ridge back about to the same depth. And then this frame on this side will fit in just fine. And also you can see the gap nicely highlighted here in the sun. This gap also needs to be widened just slightly. So with that in place, the lower screws will go in, and then the upper will sit recessed ever so slightly into this ridge, and your vents will actually do a good job of holding it in place. I've already kind of approximated it to fit it in. I've put the display in on top of where the frame would sit, and everything is going to fit just fine. It's just a little bit of a bigger job than you're going to have to do as normal, or if normal, if you have an older E53 rather than the newer E53s that have the frame that just comes out. It would have been nice to have that. It would have been a little bit faster, but in this case I don't need it because I'm just going to modify this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to cut this little extension back. I'm going to cut the extension back on the other side and widen this notch just a little bit. Keep the same depth, and just make it wide enough for that plate to fit back in. And you should be good to go. And this will still be a good addition for your car, just a little bit of extra work if you have an older E53. So I'm gonna make that work, or do that work. As far as tools to do the cutting, there's a couple of different ways of coming at it. You can easily do, if you have like a Dremel tool with a plastic cutting blade, you can cut this off. You also can just flat out just use a hacksaw blade, which is what I did before. So I just held a hacksaw blade in my hand with a glove, and just, and when I made these cuts, and just worked my hacksaw blade across to make these cuts the last time I did it. So I'm gonna do the same here when I do this, and I'm just gonna take a hacksaw blade and I'm gonna cut this ridge off, and I'm gonna flatten this ridge out, take this back a little bit, and the frame should work. So I'm gonna make those cuts, and then I'll show you when I'm done. So the brackets are mounted, and all in all, I'm actually really kind of pleased on how it turned out. So what I found is I actually took a little bit off the inner edge on both sides. So the inner edge here and the inner edge here, and then it would fit in nice and straight, and it's actually reasonably secured within that widened notch. So, and then it is a little bit difficult to show with the shadows right now, I'm sorry, but there's a lower screw down here and the bracket's in place, and actually is in place and really nice and straight. If you look at the other side as well, you can see that it's secured here at the top with the notch that I cut out. And I just cut a little bit, like I said, off the inner edge, probably 1/16 of an inch maybe, not quite a quarter, somewhere right around there. Just measured really carefully, marked with a pencil, cut downward and cut across the gap a little bit just to take that notch out. I shaved off that inner ridge right here, and then it's secured down here at the bottom. And now this frame is in and nice and straight. And all in all, given the situation of where it might be really difficult to make this work, I'm really pleased on how it turned out. The frame sits in straight, it should mount straight. And so at this point, and I've already taken out the display and I've set it in here, and it's gonna fit in really, really well. I've also put the vents back in to make sure that they fit, and they do. So again, kind of just to walk through this, and forgive me filming this by hand for a moment. What I did was I widened this upper notch in this upper crossbar here. These boxes for me were already cut back, but all you need to do is either cut them off entirely, where you could cut right here, and this piece will come out. It's the same on the other side. And then there's this little inner ridge that was right here, and I cut that off as well. Honestly, I found that doing it by hand was the easiest way to do it. I have a Dremel tool. I could have used my cutting tool cut all this stuff off really easily. It would have been maybe a little faster, but I wanted a degree of control in how I did it. So of all things, I just free-handed a hacksaw blade with a glove, and like, for example, laid the blade on that track right there and just carefully just sawed at it and just shaved it off and shaved it down pretty far back so it's gone. Did the same on the other side. So all the mounting frame is in. For those of you with a newer E53, you pull 4 bolts and this whole frame comes out. So you guys are lucky. For the a little bit older E53s like mine, you have to do a little bit of additional work to get this to work, but I believe it's going to be worth it. All right, so let's talk about cable management next, and we'll take a look at that. So when you look at the cables on the back of your display, what you're going to need to do is look at the original plug on the back of your head unit. So in this case, there's 2 different styles of plugs. There is a round post that are big kind of barrel posts, and then these that are kind of thin posts. Find the right adapter. Your display should have come with, your Avant 3 should have come with 2 different pieces depending on which one it fits. This is the right one for me. So this one has the horse collar. The barrel one usually doesn't. So just line that up, get that set in, snap the horse collar down. So that's good to go. Now there's a lot of connections here that you may or may not use. If you have an aftermarket system, you have aftermarket speakers, you've done all kinds of different things, you're going to use different connections here that I may or may not. So I'm going to show the basic setup, and then you can decide on what other setup you're going to do. Now also off this primary harness, you also have connections for your backup camera and other pieces like that, that I am going to show the installation of a backup camera into this unit, and with you know, this model of E53, it'd be really nice to have a good functional backup camera. I'm not going to do it in this video because what I want to show in this video is the installation of the device itself, and I'll have that as a secondary piece. So now when you start looking at all the other cables, one of the biggest things that I look at is which ones are you going to use. So this particular one, you've got rear outs, front outs. These are if you have the aftermarket speakers or you have an aftermarket connection. I don't. This also has the microphone connection as well. Now, the microphone, you can choose on whether you're going to use that or not. Again, you have cellular connectivity into this device, so your device can actually have its own phone number. You could treat it as that, you can make phone calls, all that sort of stuff. If you do that, you're going to need the microphone. I'm not going to use it in this case, so I'm not actually, nothing on this plug I'm going to need. All the rest I'm going to use, whether I use the rest of the connections or not. We've got DVR in, we've got all kinds of video outs and other different sort of stuff, but it's got a USB plug and I need and want that. Then we look at the next connection here. Again, different auxiliary ins, video ins, different ins. We're going to use this one as well because it's got a USB. And all the USB ports I'm going to run over to the glove box. So, and then there's a third dedicated USB port that you can see here with no other connectivity. And this is the one that I'm going to use off the primary harness that has a USB connection on it. So right here, so I'm going to use the dedicated USB off the back of the device into the USB connection on the harness itself, the primary harness. So once you select the right adapter, you connect in to the rest of the harness like that. And this is what's going to plug into the back of the display. And then you've got this USB hanging off it as well. So I'm going to use the dedicated USB for that. I'm going to fish the rest of my cables of the 2 USB cables over into the glove box because I'm going to have the external drive and the autoplay Apple CarPlay adapter over in my glove box. Now, the other thing to talk about as well is you have a raft load of antennas. They're all still in the bag, obviously. You've got 3 of the flat antennas and your GPS antenna. So when you hook all these up, you want to make sure that they're in good places to get visibility. Now, I've never really had much of a problem with it. I've worked with Avin for years. I've never had a GPS signal problem. In this car with the Avin 2, I had the GPS antenna actually sitting on the steel pipe because it had a magnet in it and never had any GPS resolution issues. But it really depends on what you want to do with them. These antennas are for your 4G and Wi-Fi. So there's lots of void space up above in the dash, and they have adhesive on them. So I'm gonna put them up in the dash up here where they'll get good signal through the thin plastic or the thin surface of the top of your dash. Same thing with the GPS antenna. I'll probably put it over here. So really the next step is good cable management and getting this all run and make it really as clean as possible. Now the good news is with the display in, you've got lots of extra space right here back in the back because you don't have that drive body or the head unit sticking back in the back. So cable management in the back behind here doesn't matter as much, but really make it as clean as possible. That way it doesn't get in the way when you do install things. So the next steps are installing the antennas, which I'm going to do, and then fish it through when you fish these cables through the glove box. It's really not hard to do. What you can do is with your glove box open, you can shine a light up through the left-hand side and you'll see your lights shine up through, and that's how you'll fish them up and through. You just push them up and through nice and easy, reach in, grab them and pull them through, leaving the USB plug behind for your external devices. I also hang on to all of the twist ties that all this stuff comes in. So when I pull all these things up, I'm going to twist tie them together, make them nice and neat. So I'm going to run all this cabling. I'm going to show you how it, where it all comes out. And then at that point, I will show you how it all connects to the back of the device. And we're more than halfway done at this point. And like I said, the only really difficult part is making sure that these mounts get in, these frame mounts get in correctly for this older style internal framing. It's not bad though. Okay, so all the cables that I need to run are run. There's some additional ones I'm going to plug in when I get there, and I'll describe them as we go. So when you look at the back of your display, there really is only one place for everything to go. It may look a little confusing at first. Notice GPS, Wi-Fi, 4G, and plus 4G is labeled, antenna, USB, and so on. But there's really only one place for everything to go. So it's just a matter of walking through and getting them all plugged in. Don't forget your antenna as well. And there's two different styles of antenna plug depending on what your original antenna is like. I'm probably going to plug that in last just because the cable's a little short from the original OEM antenna. So I'm going to plug that in last. So as we look at all these different cables, so for example, we've got this dedicated USB cable that goes right up here on top. So I'm going to plug that one in, and that's going to go into the USB on the wiring harness here. As I try to do this with one hand, so forgive me if I fumble a little bit as I go through this. So that will go there. And my logic behind that is just simply for the fact is all the rest of the other cabling with the USB ports are long runs that should go elsewhere. This guy is only dedicated to one thing, only the USB, so I'm going to use it for the connection for the wiring harness. The primary wiring harness, as you can see, with its plug goes right here. And it, like I said, there's only one place for it to go, so it's in, and you just walk through the rest. So this white plug is a 10-pin plug, 5 on top, 5 on bottom. You go, okay, well, it's going to go right there because you can tell that that's 10 pins. So you just take that, insert the plug, walk it into place, and we're good to go. Take this guy, 8 pins. And I've got my USB cables hanging out of my glove box right now. So 8-pin port, so again, look for 8 pins. It's going to be this guy right here. And we'll plug that in. Now, a couple of things you don't want to forget while we're doing this. Don't forget your CAN bus adapter, okay? So here's your CAN bus adapter. It'll go right here. Get that plugged in, and because it's just going to hang off the back of the device, so it's plugged in. Now, the other thing that I have, there's two other things that I want to mention that I've got connected here. One is I am going to use the SIM integration. So I've got the SIM adapter here. I've got a standard sized SIM card already inserted. You press it in until it clicks. So it's in. Again, only goes to one place. If you look at it, it's 8 pins. There's only one place for it to go. So it will go right there. And then the other thing that I've got installed back behind already is I also got the TPMS adapter or TPMS system as well. So the warning on the TPMS system states that you should get it as far away from electronic interference as possible. You've got a pretty reasonably long cable. So there really is some options. Like, so for example, if you did want to put it over your new glove box, you could, that sort of thing. I've run it back as far as I can in the dash. Now, I'm going to work, this is the first time I've worked with one of these these aftermarket TPMS systems. And if I've got signal problems or I've got things where I feel like I'm not getting good signal quality, I may move it later, but for now, it's okay. That is a 4-pin plug, only goes one place, right there. So now, I've got a little bit of a spaghetti mess with my cabling, as you can see, but then you want to attach all of your antennas. Now, the GPS antenna is distinct because it's got a round plug on it, so there's really only one place for it to go. they screw into place. Now these are metal connections, so if you wanted to use a little wrench to tighten these a little bit tighter than finger tight, you can. I don't necessarily see the reason for that. Now the other thing that I've also done, as I mentioned, I was going to hang my antennas. Of those long flat antennas for both Wi-Fi and GPS, I've got 2 over here, 1 over here, and the GPS antenna here as well. Now the GPS antenna cable length is really long. So if you wanted to mount it higher, like say for example you wanted to mount it up in your headliner or something like that and run it down your A-pillar, you absolutely could. I've never had a signal strength problem, so I'm not going to go through that extra effort unless I have to. But you certainly can if you want to. The same thing goes for your mic. If you remember correctly, I'm not installing the wiring harness that has the microphone adapter, at least for now. I don't see a reason to have it. I would say that you would want to run that up into your headliner, probably near where the OEM one would be, and you could have it sitting up in your headliner. I think you're going to probably get the best reception that way. It's not a function that I'm going to use, so I'm not going to go through that extra effort to do it. But as you can see, I'm just attaching the antennas as we go here. So I've got 2 on that side, 2 on this side. The antennas are the same, so I really don't see, you know, trying to match which one to which. They're all 3 of the LTE or the 2 LTE and the Wi-Fi antenna are exactly the same, so you can just plug them in wherever you feel like plugging them in. Okay, so let's do this last one here. And we've got, like I said, we've got a bit of a spaghetti mess. It's kind of an organized spaghetti mess, but it works. Okay, so we get this last antenna on, and then it's going to be a matter of feeding this all back into place. And this is where having the vents and your lower controlled out is kind of handy to be able to get your fingers back in spaces if need be to pull cabling back and make sure that it fits. This display is secured by really small, they're 2.5 millimeter machine screws that are going to go into this frame that you've mounted. One on top on each corner and 1 on bottom on each corner. So make sure not to drop them. They're really small. So the last thing I've got is the OEM antenna, which I'll have to fish out from all my cabling here. But all I have to do is plug in the OEM antenna and we're pretty much good to go at that point. The OEM antenna is going to go right on this side right here. My USB is connected, all my antennas are connected, all my wires are connected, my CAN bus is all set up and ready to go. Sorry, a little bit low on the camera. Other than that, we're pretty much good. So let me find my antenna wire. I'm going to connect that, and then I'm going to slowly fit this back into place against the brackets so we can secure it. Okay, so it's installed. And really the challenge was getting these little screws in. And one thing I noticed that once I was trying to set this in and get these screws lined up, that my frames were actually tipped inwards a little bit. These upper screws were out of alignment. So I actually took it back out and cut about 1/4 of an inch off on the outside of this frame so they could stand up straight. And now it's secured. A little bit of a challenge to get these small screws in, but they went just fine. And this thing is in super solid. I have zero concerns about it moving around or anything like that, even though this frame is a little different than what we're looking at. Then especially once the vents are in, it'll press down on these upper sections as well. I have no concerns whatsoever about this fitting. So we're actually at the stage where we can actually power it up. Everything's plugged in. I've put my lower AC controls back in. And we can walk through the rest of it. So let's go ahead and power the car up and see it come up. Now, one thing you're going to want to do, I'm going to plan a update in the future that shows all of the walkthrough of functionality. I'm not going to do that today. I want to focus on doing the installation. But the one thing that I want to stress is one of the very first things you want to do when this comes up is you connect it to your Wi-Fi or connect it to your cellular. I've got both going in this case. When it comes up, you're going to want to go into apps and go into the iBus app and actually configure it for your car. So now in this case, it came right up. If it doesn't, you want to go into the apps and pick the right car. So I've got the E53, which is what this car is. So pick the right model for your car so it knows how to talk to your car. Really, really important. Then you can go through, you can change all the rest of your settings, you can configure what you're looking at. But once you set the right type of car, hit the little triple dots up here on the corner and hit unlock. Hit unlock. It's going to run out, talk to the internet because you've got connectivity, and we're unlocked. So now if you notice, it's pulling data. So it's actually talking to the car. So that's going to work with all of your setup to make sure that it talks to your car properly, it uses DSP properly. All of those different things are set up correctly by doing that first. So once that's set, now if you notice, we're up and running, which is great. Everything's working, which is fantastic. So we are good to go. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug everything else in, and like I said, it's touch screen. Everything works great. You can get into apps. You can run different applications. You can do everything that you need to run right through here through the display. Now, what you're going to want to do is snap your vents back into place, which just walk them back in, slide them back in. They should snap right back in just like that, which they did. And then you're going to take your frame, put your frame around, and walk your frame in, and you are good to go. It's a little tight on the bottom. I'd actually start with the bottom first. Bang, and we're in. We're all done. This install all in all isn't all that hard. It might seem a little daunting with the fact that we had to cut the frame. If you have an older X5, you're gonna have to do that to make that work, but it really isn't that hard if you take it very slowly, very carefully. Right now, you can see I've got Wi-Fi connection, I've got a 3G connection because I've got a SIM card that's plugged in. So now's the time where you're gonna sit and you're gonna configure everything that you wanna configure. How you wanna set up your sound, how you wanna set up your devices, everything else is good to go. Now it's just a matter of configuration. Like I said, in the future, I'll walk through and I'll do a feature video of all the different settings so I can zoom in and go through everything. But for now, your install is done and you're good to go. All right, back in from the garage after the installation. And as you can see, we went through some extra steps. And if you have the original frame like I do, you're gonna have to cut some extra parts out. If you come at it very carefully, there's a lot of different tools you could use. In my case, actually, like I said, of all things, I just used a hacksaw blade that I held in my hand to cut off some of the little bit of extra pieces, make a little extra room to get that frame in place. What I've noticed though is that once that frame is in and secure, and the Avant 3 is installed as well, that it's completely secure. It doesn't move around at all. I have no concerns whatsoever of how well the installation has been done. If you have the little bit newer style frame where you could have taken out that entire internal framing with those 4 screws, that's great. You should have been able to get through that installation even faster because you could do that. So I am planning a feature walkthrough with the device in the near future, but like I mentioned, make sure when you first bring it up, get it attached to your wireless or cellular, get an internet connection, and then go to the iBus app and make sure that you get your iBus set correctly for the correct model, E53 in this case. And if you have the DSP like I do, to activate that as well so you don't have any sound issues. And I really want to stress what a cool thing this is, because originally DSP has been a deal breaker for aftermarket upgrades because you can't get around it. This solves that problem. I can't stress how important that was. I was able to have the Avant 2 in this X5 for the last couple of years, but what it took to get that installed, which was not originally DSP compliant at all, but what it took to get that in and get it working was really a tremendous amount of extra effort and time that really wasn't well spent as far as the amount of effort that was put in. Now, with this new Avant 3, you don't have that worry. You have DSP compatibility, which really, like I said, really has been a deal breaker for a lot of different cars from BMW over time, and now you don't have that problem anymore. So I really want to thank my partner, AvinUSA. What a fantastic company. I've worked with them almost 5 years now. They make great products, and I really have complete confidence in them moving forward in what they do and how they develop their products and move forward over time. So I want to thank them. Make sure to reach out to them. The product links will be in the video description. If you liked what you've seen, please click subscribe. You'll get your latest updates from me, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video.